Hi everyone, I'm Dean, I'm a peer researcher, and today I'm joined by Andrea and Grace, and we're going to be having a little conversation about some of our research findings on the PAC project, some of our own reflections, and some things that maybe we've learnt and that we feel should be taken forward to decision makers. So I'm joined by Andrea and Grace. If you want to introduce yourselves.
Okay, even though you just said that, but okay.
Well, you know what I mean. Give us a little bit more information, Andrea.
My favourite colour's blue. I love One Direction. Oh, I'm joking. My name's Andrea. I use she, her pronouns. I'm also a peer researcher and I'm happy to be here. Pass on to Grace.
Brilliant.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Grace, one of the PAC peer researchers, and I go with she, her pronouns.
Okay, so I think probably the best place to start is to talk a little bit about our general reflections of the project, because obviously PAC is coming to an end. I know, sad face. We are very sad about it, but also I think we're very reflective at the minute, aren't we? About how the process has felt for us as young people as well as employees, and kind of the changes that we've been making. So, Grace, I'll go to you first. What do you think has been like? Just talk me through your general reflections.
There's a lot to go through, isn't there? Well, you'll see our key main findings in our report. However, some things that I took away from the project itself was a completely different perspective because, I think from looking on the news and seeing what's going on in the world, you can tell there's high rates of crime happening, which for a period of time felt like it was daily. Every time you saw the news, a huge incident was happened, which was so horrible, especially in Merseyside. We did have a few that really, definitely took the wind out of us, and there was a huge sad feeling just across the whole city.
And I think we'll talk a bit about that in a bit as well, about how that affected us and the impact that played. Definitely.
And I think for myself, what have I been a bit more cautious? Not cautious, but I've changed my perspective on it. But when talking about mental health within the education system, within how different services treat us as young people, I always thought, these services, they should know how to look after our mental health. It's important we all deal with it day to day. However, it needs to be a more systematic approach, because I don't even think schools, they help with their teachers' own mental health. They've got these deadlines, they've got to meet, and they've got to get the right grades, they've got Ofsted to come in, and I think there's a lot of pressures from schools to do well, and them not looking after their teachers' mental health then has that negative impact onto the young people. They project it. They might, if their homework's not in, the kids are getting the back end of it, and they might experience a teacher snapping on them or saying a comment that's distasteful and might be quite insulting to a young person. And then there's that level of authority there where young people can't really have their say back or say, that wasn't on. How dare you talk to me like that way? And because I think young people were a bit more reactive, when we do express how we feel in the moment, it cannot come out so well, and then we're punished for it. However, where was that support in the first place that would have stopped that whole cycle from happening from the beginning? As if that teacher would have been a bit more reflective on themselves and thinking, I need to take 5 minutes. I need to have a little breath of fresh air before I go into this classroom and, put all these worries, these anxieties, these stresses to one side and not let that impact the young people. Same with the police. I imagine day to day, they probably see some things that I don't wish anyone to see in their whole life.
Definitely.
And having to deal with a lot of negative stigma towards the service, and thinking, people don't like us anyway, so let's feed into it, because we say that with young people. If you've got a bad perception of us, we're probably going to act like that. You don't be labelled the naughty kid, but we label our police in negative lights too. So I think it'd be hard, if I was going into the police and thinking, I'm going to have a really good perspective, I'm going to be that trusting police officer, when you met with people who already think the worst of you. But it goes both ways, doesn't it? So having that support system, it needs to be done in like from the start, from these services to begin with. Because the thing is, if you've got a young person coming up to you asking you for advice and saying, you know what, I'm struggling with my mental health, this is a big situation, I'm being bullied, something's happening to me in my personal life. If when you go to these people in these services and they have never been put in a situation, they've never been told like it's okay to express your mental health, they might have their own stigma and unconscious bias against it, and then reflect that negatively on you, like, oh, mental health doesn't exist. I know some people still believe that. Some teachers go on and think, well, I'm stressed too. Like,
which I suppose is why the education side of things is so important, isn't it? And,
exactly.
you know, teaching people that, you know, everyone experiences mental health, but obviously not everyone will have issues with that. But I suppose it's about finding coping strategies and ways to deal with it, isn't it, from an early age, which is the best thing. I really love that you talked about, you know, the impact on professionals as well and how that has a ripple effect on young people. I'm sure that's something we'll come back to. Andrea, what looking back at the project, obviously it's been 18 months or so now working on PAC. What are your overall reflections and you know, how do you feel about the process and the journey we've been on?
Overall, it's been long, hasn't it? I feel like it's been way longer than 18 months.
Lots has happened, definitely.
Lots has happened, and I feel like in my personal life, lots has happened as well. And I've been in situations where I'm just like, okay, I kind of just want to stop it now. I don't want to do this no more. But I'm so thankful that I like pushed through it and I've worked through it and I've stayed, because it has been such a rewarding job. Like, I've never been given an opportunity like this. And as Grace was saying, the amount of things have happened. After like that week where so many incidents happened, I was just there like, in my mind, I was like, well, it's clearly not helping.
I think it's important to touch on that, isn't it? For the, you know, for context, I suppose, locally.
Yeah.
That was definitely one of our challenges that we faced, wasn't it? I think it was the week in August, particularly.
Yeah.
We had 3 major crimes and instances of violence in 1 week, and it did take its toll on the team, didn't it? I mean, the whole of Merseyside was feeling it, weren't they? But I think for us, it was that sense of deflation, which is what you're touching on, Andrea, because I think a lot of the team, not just us, felt, you know, it's bad to say, but not what's the point, but, you know.
How much of an impact will our work have if we're already this far deep into a huge issue? Is there any coming back from it? That was definitely something that plays on our minds.
100%. And I think for me, that was something that, you know, reflecting on that moment, we all sort of, I think there's been various things back to even like earlier on in the project when, you know, the Ava White incident obviously happened. We've had various times where we've sort of questioned what we're doing. But I think ultimately we had to come to the conclusion that was the reason, that's what motivated us.
Yeah.
That's what drove us forward, because we need it to be the case in Merseyside and actually everywhere that things like that aren't happening. So yeah, I think we just have to keep the end goals in sight, and I think we're all the same in that, aren't we?
Exactly.
So I think we should move on then to maybe what's been going on a bit more recently in PAC and what we've been up to. So I shall go to you, Grace,
okay.
in terms of updates. I know that we took part in an urban intervention recently in the city centre. How did you find that?
I don't know. I guess anybody who's listening might have caught us when we were in town. We were just near the John Lewis with a huge vinyl on the wall asking about what would make you feel safer in Merseyside. And we had lots and lots of feedback and loads of ideas. The whole sheet was filled in, wasn't it? And you know what? Hearing the perspective of just people walking by on the street, it definitely aligned with a lot of opinions and experiences those who we interviewed had as well. And the people we talked to on the street, they were a variety of different ages. Everyone had, you know, some very strong opinions out there. And you know what? It was just amazing to see, because we are all on the same page, but the question lies is what's going to be done? What's going to change? What's going to happen?
We get there.
Exactly. So I think now is for us to see where our research findings can go to, and giving it to the right people to take care of that and make sure that something is actually actioned.
Yeah.
Definitely. How did you find that event, Andrea, the urban intervention?
It was something different, to be honest. Like,
Definitely.
normally I was sick, so I was just there, like, I was knackered.
You were struggling that day,
I was struggling,
weren't you, a
and
little
it
bit?
was one of them, like, Grace was just there, like, stopping people, and I was just there, like, oh, like, I'm like, I can't do this. Like, I don't know what it was that day, but I was just there, like, I can't stop anyone. I'm too anxious. It was just something different. I've never really done something like that before. I can do it. I can talk for days when it comes to young people, but just stopping adults in the street, like, it was just, I couldn't do it. I felt like if they ignore me, I'm going to feel so embarrassed. And I got ignored once, and I was like, no.
I think that was challenging, wasn't it? Because you don't know what response you're going to be met with, especially with members of the public. But I think on the whole, people were really responsive. People were friendly. I think when we were first, we first got there and there wasn't as many responses on people. You know, it was a Saturday, wasn't it? People had things to do. We understand that. But people were maybe a bit reluctant. So we were like, we're not selling anything. We just want people's responses, because I think the reason why we did it and the reason we felt it was important to do it was because, you know, as much as we're focused on youth violence, and obviously we want to hear young people's opinions, and that's what a lot of the project has been about, it's also about consulting the wider communities. And I think that's one of my things that I've learned in terms of my reflections of PAC. I think you've got to bring communities along with you in terms of what you're doing and your sort of goals. And I think, you know, like you said, everyone sort of has an opinion on the day.
Definitely.
And, you know, some of them were quite different in their approach. But, you know, we had a lot of the same things come up as well in terms of, we say it all the time, but the amount of people that came up to us and said, you know, we need more lighting on the streets.
Basic stuff. It's stuff
basic
that we
stuff.
shouldn't be asking for, like street lights. Like, come on, like, those doesn't cost a lot of money. It's easily done. We're not asking for loads. We're not asking for the whole brand new youth club and loads of green space. Like, we're asking for basic human, like, resources. Like,
it's not much, is it? And, you know, that's what struck me on the day, especially. I think, you know, when we've been into primary schools or secondary schools or whatever, you find that a lot of kids and, you know, young people talk about lighting on the streets, think just basic things like that, like you mentioned. And then you hear the same things from adults and sometimes like pensioners, you know what I mean? So I think like across the board, there's a lot of solutions that could be implemented that are pretty popular with the public, but it is all about how we get there. In terms of other social action stuff, I suppose I can talk a little bit about our online changemaker group, who've come on so much. Like, obviously what working with changemakers is all about is empowerment. Like, us as young people, you know, we've been empowered through PAC, and, you know, this has been our first kind of, I think it's the same for you too, isn't it? Like, first professional role or first first proper job, essentially. And that's been empowering for us. But I think what we've wanted to do and what we've said all along is that we want to leave a legacy and we want to help other young people and keep that progress going forward. So yeah, it's just been great to work with changemakers. Some of whom like weren't confident to begin with, and you know, talking about social action and building social action projects with them. A lot of them like weren't sure what they wanted to do, or like didn't
even know what social action was.
Didn't know what social action was. I don't think we knew what social action was when we first started out the project.
We did a couple of sessions on it, didn't we?
We did, yeah, to make sure that we were in the know about it. But yeah, I think a lot of them didn't know what social action was. A lot of them didn't maybe believe that they could have a voice or have an impact, which I think is
so
why
it's
so sad, and it's also crucial to work with them to be like, your voice does matter and has meaning. So yeah, with online changemakers, we are leading towards, well, we've been working with a theatre company. I'm going to be making a video, like an informative video that can go into schools, youth groups, all those sorts of settings. And we're also working on maybe like resources to go along with that. But that's all been like, you know, designed and informed by what the young people wanted and what they wanted to work on. So yeah, it's been so good to kind of see them on the journey. Is there any other kinds of social action projects you want to talk about?
I just want to touch onto the magic of having choosing to do an educational video and having those resources. It's with the aim of giving them out for free as well. So schools can actually, you know, tap into them youth groups. There isn't any barriers to accessing these resources, which will be brilliant, by the way. Absolutely boss. And you know what I mean? Like, I think having these resources and them to be done professionally, it does cost a lot. So with our projects, we've been able to do that and make it more accessible. Yeah, there we go. Accessible for young people to get a hold of, which is great, really. And you know, things like this should be done a bit more often.
Well, accessibility is everything, isn't it? I mean, that's one thing I think when we started the project, and being a bit reflective about it, obviously, because we're coming to the end. Yeah, I think when we started out, that's what we set out to do, isn't it? To build an inclusive project that works with just as many young people as possible in Merseyside. And yeah, I think we've tried to include that in everything we've done, haven't we?
Definitely.
Okay, so maybe we can just talk a little bit about kind of, obviously we're young people on the project. It always feels weird though, doesn't it, saying we're young people, because I'm 21 this year, so I'm a bit like, you know, I do still class as a young person, but I definitely do. It's up to 25. So yeah, what are your thoughts on kind of us being young people and also being employees, and like the unique insight that's given us? Andrea, I'll go to you first.
I think it's important that we are young people, because I think from everyone I've spoke to, I feel like it gives the young people we work with more like of a trust. And I know when I used to be younger and I used to have people coming into schools or coming into youth clubs, they'll be like, we want to do this with you, and we want to make it all young people led. And it's like, we know that you usually need this. And it's like, well, how do you know that we need that? Because you're an adult. How do you know what we want? So I think it was quite refreshing, because I don't think we've ever seen a project like this where it's young people led, and we can say that 100%.
And it genuinely has been. Like, I completely agree with you, Andrea, because, you know, from the start, in terms of, obviously there's other delivery partners across the UK, you know, working on the same topic as us, but in terms of our specific research focus in
like
the widest topic of youth
Lou
violence,
and Susie don't even like, we tell them what we want.
It's completely informed by us, and I think
they're our managers, by the way.
yeah. Just to give you a little bit of
Shout
context. So yeah, I think it was refreshing, and it's been amazing to work on such a youth-led project. And like I say, it's important that we don't just sit here and go, well, you know, we're peer researchers, so we're speaking for all young people in Merseyside. We're not, and we're aware that we can't do that, because we bring our own unique perspectives and our you know.
But we're not doing that, because we've got, like I said, the report coming out. It's facts. It's all facts. It's
That's
all
what
the
I'm
quotes coming from the interviews. It's all focus groups. It's everything
like
that is in that report.
It's not, but that's what I mean. It's not just us going, this is our opinion, hear us out. It's come from a collective, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Which goes back to Peer Action Collective. Obviously, that's what it's all about. Grace, I'll hand over to you then to
I think
say your thoughts.
What was so interesting was actually having that opportunity to speak as a young person and be involved in that conversation with these higher ups and stakeholders. It was such a unique experience to be in the room, because usually you'd be like, I'd watch a TV show on this or a documentary, but we were there in the room influencing change. So with the MVRP, we've helped contribute to some of their new findings and different strategic changes.
3-year strategy.
Their 3-year strategy, which is just so interesting. And that was the first time young people were included. And we made sure to mention our findings there, and some things that we mentioned they didn't even think about in the first place. So that already showed the value of having young people in there in the room to show that, 100%. You know what, we do come with value. We do give that interesting perspective that might never have been thought about in the first place.
And I think we've seen that, like, when we've gone into schools and stuff, and, you know, this isn't us just sitting here going, how great are we? Obviously, there's been challenges. There's been things we maybe haven't done as well, as, you know, because we've been limited in terms of time a lot of the time. And there's probably even more that we'd have wanted to do. But I think with the time that we've had when we've gone into schools and stuff, a lot of young people have said to us, haven't they, you know, it's quite rare that we get to speak to people who we feel like have the same experience as us, or, you know, even if we don't have the same like direct experiences, then we get it because we're young people growing up in Merseyside as well, and we see what goes on, not just as like in a professional sense, like in our work, but we also see it like on the ground, for want of a better phrase, on, you know, like in our day-to-day lives. So yeah, I think we have made an impact, and it's been great to see that. Also, I think one like kind of highlight of PAC for me has been the fact that we've worked in like such a variety of settings. Like obviously when we started, it was more like we've gone into schools quite a lot. We've gone into youth groups. Like that's been probably the predominant focus because obviously we're working with young people. But we've also, like you say, we've had the pleasure of working with the MVRP, the Merseyside Violence Reduction Partnership, for anyone who doesn't know. We've worked with the LFC Foundation delivering sessions.
Radio City.
We've been to events about youth violence. We've also been to like healthcare conferences.
A healthcare conference, which is just so fascinating, wasn't it?
Definitely. So
Got
I think
to work with Street Doctors, which is a new app.
Yeah.
I loved that. That was amazing.
So yeah, and I think we've been able to work with people in like I've said, healthcare, education, business to a certain extent, because, you know, people developing things to try and help out with youth violence. So we've worked with so many different professionals. I think we've networked, we've done our fair bit of networking, haven't we? And we've built those relationships. But it's definitely been worthwhile because I think when I started on this project, I'd kind of worked in like youth voice before. Like I was on my local youth cabinet, but I was a bit younger than I am now. So I was always passionate about the issues, but I think I've learned a lot, and that's the main thing. And I think I've seen things from like different perspectives that I probably wouldn't have from not being in this project. What are your kinds of thoughts about that? Of like, obviously we've had the opportunity to sit in a lot of different spaces that, you know, aren't always open to young people in, you know, in our position.
I think, like you said, like you've learned how to go about the situation differently. Like I've always been the kid, like I was a young inspector, I was a school counsellor, like back from like even when I was younger, I was always that kid who would like get the point across. I'd let you know if I had a problem. But I think I've kind of come to a conclusion that sometimes you can't always scream and shout about something and get what you want. Like you've got to go about it a different way and more professionally.
Yeah.
And the kid in me is kind of upset because I was that kid who was screaming, shouting, but like, no, we want this. No, we want that. But sometimes it doesn't always work, and you've got to realise that, and you can't always get your way.
You've got to be a bit pragmatic, haven't you?
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can still have kinds of same end goal. Yeah. But it's about like channeling that energy of like our inner kids really, and being like, this needs to change, because things do have to change. But I think, you know, we've made like small steps, but I think it will be worthwhile in the long haul.
You know what? I'd like to chime in. I think the way we've spoken about, we've engaged with a lot of different people and different services at different levels up. And I remember some of us feeling a bit unsure whether will we be respected? Will we be treated the same? You know, we're coming back with our I don't know whether this is right to say, but professional opinion, because we've worked with these young people. We're coming in with statistics, data, and, you know, there was always that worry in the back of some of our heads thinking, will we be respected for our views and opinions? Will they think this is valuable? Is this worthwhile? Or, you know, will they have the idea that, you know what, we already know this information, you're not adding anything new? But we were treated so well by so many different people who wanted us to spread our message and would then get us in contact with other people across the city. And it's really been such a wonderful team experience. It's felt like that, like a full-on community, and that cross-sharing of information has been wonderful.
Which is when I, like, to follow on from that, when I started out on this project, when like we'd have those initial conversations about like, well, what are we looking for and what do we actually want to change? That's one of the things I pointed out. So I was like, I feel like we need to have more of an integrated strategy without making it sound too like technical and too like, oh, we need to, you know, get everyone. We basically needed to get everyone talking to each other in the city, and I think that's happening more. Those conversations are happening. I don't want to say we've been like the missing link, and it's like, oh, you have been missing us this whole time.
I do. I think we were.
But I do think that, like you say, Grace, even beyond like our kind of peer researcher network and our network in PAC, we've had a lot of people in Merseyside, because I think that's another important thing. As much as like a lot, like we've spoken to other people on other project or other PAC projects across the UK, and obviously like a lot of similar things have came up, but it's also important to think about local context as well, because like there's loads of things going on in Merseyside that maybe we know about and like other areas wouldn't understand it as much. That's not to be patronising, like it's the same in other areas.
Exactly.
We wouldn't get them as much, but that's why it's important that like we've been doing this project in our area. But yeah, I think that within Merseyside and like the general, well, I don't want to say the Northwest region, but in our region, I think a lot of people have been willing to help us out, and yeah, that's been great. Moving forward then, I think obviously we're talking about like we're very reflective at the minute because you know, we've been working on PAC now for a while, and we've been, I keep using this word journey. I feel like it's a bit of a cliche, but
It really has been a journey though,
but it has
hasn't
been a journey. At times it's felt like an emotional roller coaster with some of the things we were talking about. But moving forward, obviously now we're at a stage where kind of I feel like we're collaborating a bit more with national other PAC groups and seeing what the results have been, which has been really interesting. Just to tell people watching and listening, you know, what our hopes are for what's going to happen and what changes are going to be made. What are your kinds of thoughts around that? And I'll obviously feed in a bit as well, but what do we think about, like, are we optimistic about what's happening? Or
you know what, I feel like PAC was a bit of, you know, it stirred the pot a little bit because it's not that often you have young people getting to take a project on and interview other young people. It's quite a rare thing that gets to happen. So we managed to gather a bit of buzz throughout the whole city. We've worked with so many different people. There will be that expectation to see what's changed, what's going to be different. People will be asking these questions, and it won't just be young people. It'll be different services that'll be asking these questions as well. So it's not just as isolated as, say, I don't know, like a support service saying, you know what, we've got loads of young people saying they want more cameras and more street lights, and then, you know, that's
nothing really gets done.
Nothing really gets done. But if we've got multiple services saying it, multiple young people, we're able to amplify those opinions and solutions at a completely different level. So I think I really do think that more can happen as well, because we've been on radio shows, we're doing podcasts now, and we've been on other people's podcasts as well. So you know what I mean? The message is out there already. There's enough people. I think if enough people push for something, it can be changed. So I'm very optimistic, actually.
I'm optimistic too. I think it's good that we've, you know, like, you know, we've done our bit, like that's that, because obviously it's a continual process. But I feel like we've been able to do, you know, our bit on the project, and now we're passing it along, and it's what happens after this. But I think, like you say, it's the amplification. It's the fact that we have got the message out there, and it's kind of, because it is a collective saying it, and you know, so many people across the country are saying the same thing as well. It's kind of harder to dismiss or ignore.
It's hard to ignore.
It's hard to ignore because, you know, it is power in numbers, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm just excited for what's coming next, because like you said, we're not just saying, there you go, leave it, because hopefully we might get PAC 2, which
Fingers
crossed. But because we have taught so many young people about what social action is, they can, if we have someone adventurous, which we've spoke to a lot of adventurous and amazing young people, they could just be like, okay, well, I want to start a protest, let's do that. I want more streetlights, let's do that. So I'm really looking forward to what the young people we spoke to have to do next, because they've got so much potential.
Me too.
And I'm just so excited for it.
I think that's why it goes back to what we were saying earlier about change makers. That's why we wanted to empower people from the start, because it's like we are just a group of young people, and you know, obviously the nature of being young people, you're not young for long. So the changes kind of do need to be implemented as soon as possible. But it's about giving that back and giving back to the community, making sure that, you know, whether it's in PAC or other projects that are similar, we can change that culture. And that's kind of like, well, young people don't really get a say in things that affect them. And we can change that going forward so that young people in Merseyside and in other places feel comfortable and confident to be able to do that.
Yeah, and you know what's so weird about that? We're saying that young people feel comfortable to have their voice on things that impact them. It's a part of our rights. On Article 12, it's a part of children's rights to be heard on things that impact them. And the fact it's not being, I wouldn't say it's being met too well. No. I think there could be more that could be done. We need to involve more young people into those wider conversations that do impact them and informing them that legally they are meant to be involved. And, you know, so many people are duty bearers of that responsibility to amplify young people's voices, to listen to them and action them as well, not just brush them to one side and go, nice tick box, that's nice. Like to actually do something.
And to follow on from that, not always passing the parcel, because I feel like that's from what we've spoken, or we've obviously spoken to a lot of young people about this and experiences with services and all that kind of thing. A lot of people lack trust because they feel like, we've spoken about the pressure on services, and obviously that's a completely different conversation. Well, actually it's not, it ties into this quite well, but
they feel a bit like a broken record.
Yeah, a lot of young people feel like, you know, they can speak about their experiences and it might get listened to, but what actually happens about it and who's gonna actually take responsibility and take that forward. So we've been trying to be a voice as much as possible, haven't we? And I'd like to think we've done as good a job as we can.
Not only a voice, but the link to connect people to the right people, to talk to, because to be honest, it is quite hard to find the right people and then get in contact with them and then try and get a meeting with them. It is it's a hard process
we
to do.
Struggled. We like, obviously, thankfully, being linked to YPAS, we already had a lot of connections, but even we struggled, like setting up Zoom meetings, trying to find the right time, just even like the small stuff of being anxious of meeting new people. Which I think that has all, like, being a part of PAC has helped us so much with, like, confident wise.
Oh, definitely. We've come on like leaps and bounds. I for one, I probably wouldn't have been doing something like this like 18 months ago. You know, wouldn't have been as confident to talk about these issues specifically because, like you say about you know, child rights and the UN UNCRC.
There we go.
We got it right. But things like that, we've actually learned pieces of legislation that affect young people, and we've got more of an in-depth understanding on things like, you know, having a trauma-informed approach and what that means for young people. And, you know, we're able to kind of implement that into what we're doing. So, yeah, in terms of kind of key messages then, or, you know, things that we've taken away from PAC or what we've learned and what we want to give on to decision makers, people in power, and, you know, anyone who's kind of working with young people, what would our main lessons be, or, you know, things that we want from them as well? I'll go to you, Andrea.
That's like, let me have.
Sorry, it's a bit of a wordy one, isn't it? Do you want me to start off?
Yeah, you start.
So I'll start off and then I'll hand over to you.
I've got a list waiting.
Yeah, Grace is going to be like. So I think for me, one thing that I've learned, and I feel like a broken record saying this because I do say it all the time, but youth violence is not something that comes alone. It's not a one-dimensional issue. I feel like a lot of people just go, oh yeah, youth or violence, and it's like, oh, it's on the rise. What do we do about it? First, you've got to tackle the root causes, and you've got to unpick the issues that are actually feeding into the issue of youth violence. And I think from what we've seen, and, you know, it's actually worsened, I think, while we've been doing PAC, not through us, but, you know, through the wider sort of factors. I think cost of living is a big issue. Poverty, young people living in areas where they don't have much opportunity. Even in Merseyside, one thing we've spoken about is not everything being concentrated in the city centre, because I think a lot of young people, you know, that when you talk about the Liverpool City region or Merseyside, you've got Knowsley, Sefton, St Helens, Halton, the Wirral.
Exactly.
You know, and even within Liverpool, it's not just about the city centre. So there's so many young people who, you know, I think one phrase that we've come to kind of dispel a little bit is, you know, when organisations used to talk about young people being hard to reach. And
They're easy to ignore.
we
That's more
don't
what it
accept that.
is.
We think that organisations, and I think this has been happening more and more, need to reach out to young people. Even the ones that they do deem to be hard to reach, because sometimes organisations are hard to reach from young people, and they need to be more aware of the services. Sorry, I'll hand over to Grace
No,
now.
I completely agree with what you're saying. I can second it 100%. Gosh, with some things I want to say. Oh, okay. I think since learning about things like ACEs, so adverse childhood experiences, how to be trauma informed, this is some training that we've done on quite a low level, but we've still got that knowledge, we've still been informed. I want to see that rolled out across every single person who comes into contact with a young person, and I'm confused why it hasn't already been. I understand funding is an issue, but surely our human interactions to each other, that's what's most important. Like, that's what you see day to day. That's what changes people's perceptions on you, is how you're treated. Because I think you can either cause harm to a person, or you can cause healing. So with somebody you might have had multiple bad experiences with one service, and then they may meet you, who could be
a breath
of fresh air and completely change their perspective. Somebody who's understood them, somebody who's taken the time to actively listen to them and not just sort of dismiss them, or, going through the woes like, oh, I've got 10 million things to think about. I'm just gonna, I need to get through this. You're a number at this point. Young people don't want to feel that way, because things that are going on in their life, that's huge for them. That's what feels like is going to dictate the rest of the whole life. And a lot of the time, it almost does, in a sense, because those events and those things that happen to you when you're in your developmental years,
formative, isn't it,
and
years?
Going through right up until you're 25, your brain's still forming. All of those events are so important and can impact you for the rest of your life.
Can I just say quick? I think that's really important to stress about the importance of, even if it's just one professional, that can change like a young person's perspective on like authoritative figures or like services so much. So for all the professionals out there, never underestimate like the kind of power that one interaction with a young person can hold. Because you might be, like you said, the one person who has, had a positive experience, that young person's has a positive experience with. I just want to say one more thing on cost of living, because it slipped me mind when I was talking about it. One thing I'm kind of really passionate about is, I think, especially, the climate at the moment where, lots of people are struggling, and, especially in areas like Merseyside, I think it's important to stress that a lot of the times when these things occur with young people and, youth violence occurs, a lot of people are, and sometimes rightly so, but people are quick to sort of say, where are the parents? And I think we have to examine this is why I think youth violence isn't a one-dimensional thing.
Exactly.
It's got so many factors. It's so important to look at the relationship between, parents. A lot of parents are working all the hours God sends. Like back in the day, I sound like I've got like I'm old now. When I'm going back in the day, but back in the day, it is true. You could have one parent in work, and someone else, like, look, not to be too traditional, could be a mum or a dad or whoever, just a guardian looking after the kids. If both parents are like working all the hours God sends, in it's obviously not everyone is brought up in that two-parent household, but just talking for that, if like there's two people in a household and they're working, and then like kids are kind of letting themselves in from school, making their own dinner maybe at times, who's there to kind of supervise that young person and ensure that they are being brought up in a healthy environment? And I think that's why the relationship with like schools comes into it as well. So it takes so much to bring up a child. It takes what's that saying? It takes a village to bring a child up. I can't say it, but anyway, Andrea.
I think both of your points are so valid. Like, I want to go into more detail about the root cause, because it is true. It's like, it isn't just one problem, and it will never be one problem. Like, it's so detailed, and that's why I think it is so hard to get rid of. And I know we're not going to live in some sort of utopia where all of us hold hands and we sing Kumbaya. Like, there's always going to be violence or violence in general, but it's getting that, okay, well, poverty can affect it, or mental health affects it, and we want to sort that out. It's zooming in on one of them and trying to bring it down by like 5%. any little thing could help.
I think it's important you say that as well, because I know I've said that throughout the whole podcast because everything's important, but I really think it's important to stress that like it covers, you know, if we're saying to decision makers and even like people in government what's important, I think a lot of people are quick to sort of, and you know, maybe this, it definitely is part of it, but people are quick to focus on the crime element of it and maybe like prisons and things like that. And it's like, well, we need tougher sentences for people who commit these crimes. And maybe, you know, there's an element of, a lot of people said that to us with the urban intervention.
Yeah.
People were saying we need to have tougher consequences. We need to, you know, so one person in particular mentioned to us about, you know, for instance, if there's a lot of vandalism in a community, you know, small businesses being affected and things like that, maybe people should sort of be met face to face with those business owners and have to kind of rebuild what they've broken, basically.
Yeah.
And that kind of restores the trust in the community. And that's part of the conversation, definitely. But I think it's a stick and plaster, like the crime elements and being like tougher sentences and being harsher on people. It's part of the conversation, but it is a stick and plaster. And we do need to focus on prevention, not always.
Early on prevention as well.
Early help and early prevention, definitely.
Talk about like the relationships. I think like when we can relate it to like tougher sentences and stuff like that. I feel like young people who are committing crimes, they need a better relationship with the probation officer, or police in general, because it's like, I know from people I've spoken to, and it's like they'll go to like the probation officer and they'll just go and speak to them for like 1 minute to make sure that they're doing what they're doing in the probation. Like, I feel like there should be more of a connection and be like, oh, how are you today? How's your week gone? Having a full-on conversation rather than, oh, well, tick, I've seen you, there you go on. Because like you said, it makes them feel like a number.
Yeah, a statistic, not an individual.
Talk about criminalising children or young people. It's like, we want to make sure that we're heading them down a right route, rather than just like
letting them continue to go down that path. Yeah.
And it almost turns into a cycle, doesn't it?
And then getting them, or like making them continue so much until they get put in prison. Like, catch them the first time and help them, send them on a better route, let them know there's youth clubs, making sure that they're going to school, and if they're not good in school, put them in a provisional, like Everton Free School.
Yeah.
We've been there. We worked with them. Amazing.
We've worked with both football teams in Liverpool, by the way, so
But,
covering everyone there.
I know, making sure there's no bias. But
Of course.
amazing. We went there. We done workshops with them. Literally the best unit I've ever seen. And there's a taboo around units, isn't it? It's like naughty kids. Like I said, I don't believe kids are naughty. I don't think there is a naughty children. But that unit was seen. Even if you weren't naughty, even if you struggled with mental health, you could have went there. And I just loved how they worked. And I feel like we need more, like, what's it called? Provisional. What is it called?
Youth provisions, alternative
provision. Maybe what I'd say is like diversionary activities, what I'd refer to it as.
100%.
Because not everyone's going to be good at school.
Well, so many people don't. Yeah, like I keep coming back to the urban intervention, but that was like when we spoke to the public, we speak to young people as well. So many people say there's not, and it's particularly what strikes me is when the parents say it, or like the carers of children say it, and they go, there's nothing for kids around here to do. And it could be in a lot of areas in Merseyside and beyond as well. But I think that's something that's really crucial. So feeding on from that then, what would be our, like, if we were to demand one or maybe like a few things, if we were to give a list of things that we were demanding or wanting to change from decision makers and people in power, what would it be?
Well, you know what? Something interesting I found out not too long ago is that in Scotland, they give free mental health support training to parents when you've got your newborn and if you've got children. Why isn't that being done in England or Wales? If Scotland can do it, surely we can as well. And don't we want parents to be equipped with the best tools possible to help support their young people, even carers as well? Because, you know what, if we can nip it in the bud early or have that support system be from the home, that's brilliant. as well. Like, it's having as many people that can be a support system as possible. Because then, you know what, if somebody is having that negative experience, or, you know, they don't feel like they can talk to their family, who are they going to turn
Exactly.
to? Are they going to be a person who's positive in their life, or could it be somebody who could use them and use that pain, use that frustration in a negative way and get them into that wrong crowd? But, you know, like we said, diversionary activities that can change your crowd, the people that you're in, change your perspective. So yeah, I feel like I've gone a bit off the topic of what you were asking, but I felt it was valid.
You know, it does link in, doesn't it? And it's what we're asking for. It could be a multitude of things, because it all does feed into youth violence at the end of the day. Andrea, what about you? What would you be asking for from decision? If there's not one thing, but like if there's a couple of things maybe that you could take from PAC, what we've learned, and say to decision makers, this is what needs to change based on, you know, what we've looked at.
I definitely think teachers. I think everyone should have that little bit of basic information about being trauma informed, even if you Google it. Like, at the end of the day, it's not going to hurt to know about like adverse childhood experiences or being trauma informed. If anything, it's going to make you a better person. I think, but anyone who works with young people, so children, teachers, police, probation, youth workers, the list goes on and on. I feel like there definitely should be some sort of training around mental health,
100%.
trauma-informed, ACEs, all them, because at the end of the day, it's just going to be easier for you.
100%.
And help younger people as well.
And then mine, I would probably say, similar to you, Grace, increase in youth provision. And I think there needs to be, like, I know we talk about it a lot, but like a change in culture of, like, I think too often people who don't live in communities or don't understand the communities kind of impose things on them, and that's where the mistrust of authority comes from. It feels like there's not like a collaboration there or like consultation even. So I think maybe switching to more of a community consultation model. Obviously that's not always possible, but in the most many instances as possible, I think that the community, the wider community should be consulted about youth services and other issues as well, to kind of improve that level of trust, particularly with, you know, councils, just people in positions of power really. And to feed into that, I think we need more community policing specifically. And I think people's perception of the police is very, like, obviously they are authoritative and they are there to enforce that. But I think there's another role for the police as well in terms of like community safety and people being able to feel safe in the communities. And I think we do need more of that. And we also urgently need to tackle not just the current cost of living crisis, but also just poverty generally, because it existed before then, and I'm sure it'll exist after our current crisis. So those would be mine.
I think feeding into that, when, you know, we're talking about young people not having anything to do, in some cases there are plenty of things to do. However, it's not affordable. If you've got multiple kids, trying to get them to go to multiple different activities, then some after school clubs you've got to pay for as well, then you can see how the pennies start to crunch then, and you're not able
100%.
to provide
Especially
that.
right now.
We need,
It's tough.
I think we need affordable activities, and we need them to be relevant. And also I think with, there's been a few people say this to us, sometimes youth clubs are obviously there and they're great. Like, you've had great experiences with your youth club, Andrea, but I think they need to be there at like, youth workers basically need to be valued more and empowered to be able to put youth services on when young people need them most. So especially like nighttime sessions and things like that, because a lot of young people hang around at night, don't they? And
I mean, come on, like most
cliche,
youth clubs like close at like the latest 10. But I remember before PAC, like I remember going to I can't remember what it was, but like loads of people came and we speak, and this guy from London came, and he was the first person who opened the youth club that stayed open all night, which I think is amazing, because like we said, safe spaces, not many people can go in and that be the safe space, so they're going to chill around the streets and they're going to mess around. So I think that is a cool idea to think about, but I feel like it'll be very hard to tackle, especially right now where we can barely keep them open throughout the day.
Even
Definitely.
just a more 24-hour culture with our shops to have them open. Because I think if I was a young person, I was feeling unsafe, going into like the local shop during the evening would be.
Or
You
even
feel
if
so relieved, wouldn't you? Because the CCTV there, the staff, you know,
even
it
if it's
feels
not
like
shops,
a safe
just
space.
like a safe space to go to at all hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think that'd be very valuable. Okay, so thanks to Andrea and Grace. It's been lovely being here, and yeah, just talking through everything. I'm really sad that PAC is coming to an end, but I think it's been great to have that reflection time. And thank you everyone for watching or listening. I hope you enjoyed.